Rappin with ReefBum is sponsored by Polo Reef, Champion Lighting and Supply, and ReefnBid.
Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the show. I am back with Rappin with ReefBum, and I've got a new co-host, and we got a whole bunch of really cool things going on. What's going on there, Don?
Very good, very good.
You know, it was about 4.5 months ago since I last signed off, and I guess I missed it. I guess I missed the show and the but you know what, the weekly thing was a lot to handle. So I think doing this once a month will be a much less burdensome thing for me in terms of all the work that was going into this thing. But yeah, so Dong's going to be Dongzo is going to be my my co-host for this revitalized version of Rappin', and I'm really psyched to have you on board, Dong.
Oh, I'm very excited here too.
So for those that don't know Dong, and Dong was like one of my most popular guests on the first version of the on the show, and I lost track in terms of Dong how many times you were on the live stream as a guest. Do you have a 5, 6 times or something?
Yeah, maybe 5 to 6.
Something like that. But so
yeah,
Dong,
like that.
Dong has a PhD in chemistry and worked for several pharmaceutical companies in various therapeutic areas. He got into the saltwater aquarium hobby in 2004, and currently his company, AquaGarden Inc., is focusing on aquaculture of large varieties of coral, especially SPS, as well as the company is also, Dong's big in terms of educating the public to help support a sustainable saltwater hobby. But I really think Dong's going to make an incredible co-host. You know, he is a scientist, but he has a tremendous database of knowledge in his head that he has amassed throughout his, educational, professional experience and experience in the hobby from growing corals. So let me tell you, Dong is pretty damn good at growing and coloring up corals. I've got many of those corals in my systems, and I've visited him a few times, and man, he's got the you got the knack there, Dong. You got it down. So, but,
thank you.
I guess perhaps though the thing that endeavors people the most to Dong is his authenticity. You know, his matter of fact opinion. Yes, you know, he is really knowledgeable and smart, but he's also a very likable guy. And
hopefully
he doesn't have an agenda, and I think people really appreciate that. So that's going to be, I think Dong's going to just be a great compliment to myself. He's not going to necessarily challenge guests, on their opinions, but he can kind of tap into that knowledge base of his and potentially provide different perspectives. And, so I think that's going to be really cool. And again, Dong, really thrilled to have you along for this ride.
Thank you. Thank you.
I see a lot of familiar faces in the stream, and thanks, folks, for coming back. We got there's a whole bunch of Champion Lighting and Supply. Todd, what's happening there? Todd, sponsor. I know there's a whole bunch of other people that just scrolled through. Oh, Adam Moore, thank you so much for that super chat. Dong is a national treasure. Thank you so much. And also had one other super chat here I wanted to highlight. Was that okay, there was another one I thought I had seen before, but so thank you very much, Adam. Before we bring on our guests, and we've got Mr. Chris Meckley and Mr. Chris Wood, who are going to be on this this live stream.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank the sponsors of this revitalized version of Rappin', Polo Reef. Make sure to check out Polo Reef's new YouTube video. The team loaded up 9 prize Japanese koi and flew to Las Vegas for the American Koi Show. And the competition was fierce. The flight back home was frightening, ending with a life-threatening scare and police on the scene. I'm going to have to watch that video. It's definitely not a video to miss. Make sure to subscribe to their YouTube channel at Polo Reef for the video drop notifications. Champion Lighting and Supply. Flow is very important for keeping corals happy in a reef. Growing corals can block flow from wave makers and create dead spots. That's about to change. The ocean sea wave will oscillate any wave maker or powerhead in your aquarium from 0 to 180 degrees at an adjustable speed. I saw this at Restock. It was really cool. This creates natural dynamic flow patterns, reduces dead spots, and kicks up detritus. The Ocean Sea Wave is available exclusively through Champion Lighting and Supply. Visit championlighting.com for more info. And a new sponsor, ReefnBid. ReefnBid is the first of its kind in the reefing hobby, an online auction marketplace built by reefers for reefers to alleviate traditional auction pain points with features like auto pay. ReefnBid currently hosts over 40 sellers, ranging from established vendors such as Aqua SD and Pieces of the Ocean to private hobbyists. It's like going to a virtual frag show. That's pretty cool. And getting great deals in an auction format. Check them out at reefnbid.com. That's reef, the letter N, and then bid.com. All right, you guys. Hang on a second. I got some new streaming software here, so this might be a little clunky here at first. But what's happening, fellas? We got Mr. Chris Meckley from ACI and Mr. Chris Wood from Captivate Aquaculture. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you back.
Yeah.
And with Dom at the same time. It's awesome.
Yeah. No, this is going to be a lot of fun, man. And so just for those that don't know Chris Meckley, he's the owner of ACI Aquaculture, coral wholesaler in Plant City, Florida. And we also have Chris Wood from Captivate Aquaculture. Chris is a marine biogeochemist and the chief science officer of Captivate Aquaculture. He's also the founder and sole owner of Captivate. And today our discussion is going to be about how to use ICPs to help dial in trace elements. So one quick thing, I want to give a shout out to Paul Allen, who is the president of the Boston Reefer Society, as well as the moderator of this show. And Paul, I hope you're not doing a lot of moderating at this point, because Paul yesterday went for major back surgery, got released from the hospital today. He was waiting, I think, 6 years for this surgery. So he must be hopped up on painkillers and whatnot. But I did see him in the chat earlier there. And like I said, Paul, dude, get yourself some rest and make yourself as comfortable as possible. Right?
I don't think you can take Paul out. I think he's just gonna keep going. He's like the Energizer Bunny.
So all right. Let me so I mentioned I got new streaming software. Let me just, while I got you guys here, I want to kind of provide an overview of how I decided to why I decided to restart this show. And the last show was 4.5 months ago. And I wasn't really, I certainly missed the show, but I wasn't really thinking about starting it up again. Maybe I had in the back of my head, maybe like in a year or something, but it wasn't like front and center. And Reef Stock was coming up, and I was looking forward to going to Reef Stock and all that sort of thing. So I had a blast at Reef Stock. Mr. Meckley was cool hanging out with you there, dude, and a lot of other groovy reefers. And I see there's Mr. Rich Ross is in the chat. What's happening there, Mr. Rich Ross? He was also at Reef Stock. And speaking of shows, you guys going to Reef Retreat?
Well, schedule conflict, unfortunately.
I know, Chris, you're probably not going
yet.
Chris, you got to go. I'm going to Reef Retreat, but
I think we made up our mind. We're probably going to end up going.
Nice.
Yeah,
I'm bringing my boat so we could do some fishing if you wanted to.
Ooh, where is this?
All right.
It's Bristol, Rhode Island.
Rhode Island.
And so it's being built June 6th to 8th. It's being built as a weekend of reef aquarium education and community building with world-class speakers, workshops, discussions, and more. You could visit reefretreat.org for more information. But people, you got to come. You got to come, man.
I've got 30
reefing shows
coming right around that time. So if I leave, I'll be in trouble.
I guess you can't bring the ducks with you. I'm bringing my boat with me.
Now, these are ducklings, and they're a lot worse to deal with than the adults.
Wow.
Guys, actually, pardon me, that I think my skimmer is making a little bit noise.
You got a tank that sprung a leak?
No. The skimmer probably low the water. Just
it's a bad omen.
Okay.
Okay.
Hey, Andy Bauma, what's going on there, guy?
Andy's in the house.
Also saw him at Reef Stock here.
Yes.
Todd, Champion Lighting and Supply. Yep, I know Todd. Todd's one of those sponsors at Reef Retreat. So, all right, let me Dong's heard this story already, but let me tell the story in terms of like how I decided to get back into the live stream earlier than expected. So I had a dream. Seriously, I had a dream. And during this dream, I had a dream that, and I hadn't talked to Dong since, I guess the last time you were on the show, which might have been like 5.5 months ago or something.
Yeah, something.
So I had a dream that Dong and I were going to be co-hosting the new version of Rappin With ReefBum. And I was like, okay, that kind of like, that's interesting. And so the next morning, I swear to God, the next morning, there was an email in my inbox from Dong saying, hey, I haven't talked to you in a long time. You know, how's it going? When are you coming out of retirement? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, holy shit, man, that's a sign. That is a freaking sign. That's why I told Dong that in the email that's what happened. And he's like, let's do it. I was like, yep. All right. I guess we're this thing's happening. So it's it's pretty bizarre. All right. So the other thing is that what did I want to? Oh, hang on a second. I got to get my ducks in a row there. Sorry, Chris, for stealing that.
You're welcome to steal all of the duck epithets.
So the all right, so the big difference is Dong is my co-host. The other big difference is that this is going to be one time a month versus once every week. So that'll definitely lessen the burden on me in terms of trying to get guests and trying to keep the show going every week. It was pretty demanding. It's also going to be single topic driven. So no more bouncing around different topics. Tonight we're going to be talking about ICPs and trace elements. Well, yeah, right. Chris is the king of bouncing around. Meckley is the king of bouncing around topics. There, right? That 5-hour live stream we had the last go around.
Scatterbrain.
Yeah.
Well, everything in reefing is tangential.
Yeah.
So you can't just keep it all dialed into one thing. It's difficult.
Right.
We'll try.
Yeah.
Just.
Yeah.
Reel me back in.
So the other thing is that going to typically have mini panels of guests. So it'll be Dong and I as co-hosts, and we'll have 2 or 3 guests on at a time on these certain topics. 60-minute format. I don't know, man. How likely is that going to be to keep this at 60 minutes? I'd be interested to hear what people say out there in terms of like, is that something like you would want to see shorter podcasts and live streams? I mean, I've been going like an hour and a half, 2 hours. What are your, I have 8 hours a day to get me through.
There was already a comment that said with Meckley on there, it's going to be 4 a.m. till you're done.
Oh, which comment was that? Which comment was that?
It was back. It was right before you brought us in.
Oh dear.
All right. So here's a comment.
It was from John Wright.
Here's a comment. All right, I'll say Reef Dode. I have 8 hours a day to get me through the day just to listen to you guys ramble on my friends. I'm all ears. All right, so that's a vote for longer versus shorter. Who else wants the 8 hours? Brennan's Reef, 8 hours or nothing. that sucks.
I did 12 hours one time.
Long podcasts are appreciated. So this is another new thing. I've got new streaming software, and it's kind of cool to be able to pull up the comments like this. That's nice.
That's cool.
It is cool.
Rich, dude, 24/7. Why don't you get a show together with Chris Meckley and you guys go for that?
Salem, I got that covered. 24 hours in July. Is what he's begging me to do.
Laugh on a single topic, take it to exhaustion.
There ought to be a serious channel for reefing.
Yeah. There you go. There you go.
That's up to you.
Well, I guess what I'm seeing right here is like people want longer versus shorter.
Yeah, well, that's not a problem here. I mean, this could go on for quite a while. For those of you who haven't seen the proposed outline, it's extensive.
All right, so let's get into this topic here, and I'm gonna put the first question out to the Chris's here, and so you guys have a lot of extensive experience. Meckley, you run a commercial operation. Chris, you have products that cater to hobbyists as well as commercial operations as well. But if you had to make a recommendation, you two guys, if you had to make a recommendation to a hobbyist in terms of, at what point in a reef tank's lifespan should you start dosing trace elements? And is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Does it vary depending on the circumstances? I probably could answer that yes, but is there any general guidelines that you could provide?
You go first.
Well, if it was me, I would start by being very conservative in dosing it in the beginning and just making sure I was doing ICP testing, because why starve the animals from something that is necessary for them, and then bring it to them later and as the aquarium matures. I mean, I think it's only going to help the animals settle into a system when they have everything they need to thrive in a system versus just surviving in a system. That doesn't mean your corals aren't going to do well without them, but you will. I'm positive that you'll notice a big difference, especially with specific elements that it will help them to settle into a system a lot better than if they're depleted. Iron's one of them for sure. Manganese, cobalt, and honestly copper. People say, oh, you shouldn't be dosing copper to your tank. Well, yes, you should be, because it's one of the most important aspects of photosynthesis. And, the zooxanthellae is utilizing it, and all the other algae in your system are. So I say, if you're going to, set up a reef tank and you want to do it kind of the way I do it, just dose conservatively and just do testing and make sure that you're not overdosing it, because that's the biggest problem is getting elevated levels of certain elements. Certain ones can be very detrimental to your system if you're overdosing. So that's what I think.
If we're keeping the discussion to the critical minor and trace elements that are involved with photosynthesis and associated biochemical reactions, then I would say you start off with a good salt, one that's got those elements present, hopefully. If you're going to start putting, I think, scleractinians into the system, at that point, if it's in your mind that you're going to start dosing minor and trace elements and you are interested in the idea of ICP analysis, then do an ICP analysis before you put your first stony coral in, regardless of what stony coral it is. And likely you're not going to just put a $5 frag or a $10 frag. You're going to put in 20 of them, or you're going to put in colonies. The 35 or 40 or 60 bucks that you're going to spend on the ICP analysis at that point is going to identify potential issues. Leading up to that, it's going to protect your investment potentially from loss. But leading up to that, if you're just doing regular routine water changes while the system is settling in, that's a good way to go about doing it. If you're not going to be doing ICP testing, then go with something that's going to provide just those critical elements and leave the rest of it out. And just figure that it's going into the system as long as you're dosing on a fairly routine basis, and that will support those critical reactions, those like photosynthesis and everything like that.
How much does salt make a difference in terms of the base salt that you're using?
I think it's the most important aspect of water chemistry to begin with, because especially where it comes to the major ions, if the ratios are really off to begin with, and further, if the means of verifying salinity is not reliable, you could be going along for months with goofy water chemistry, hyposalinity, and you start putting coral in and it just gradually dies over a period of time, and you can't figure out why. And not having those ratios where they ought to be and keeping them in line with the salinity of the water, furthermore, which is a huge thing, just makes the initial phases of keeping a reef system successfully really challenging. And if you wind up losing a lot of livestock over the first 2 years for reasons that you don't necessarily understand, but you started out with cost-cutting measures in ways that really are counterproductive, now you've saved yourself into getting rid of that system or being massively frustrated. With not only just loss of corals, but proliferation of nuisance organisms that proliferate in environments that are conducive to their survival, but not for the coral.
Yeah.
So
I can go back to 18 years ago when, I started ACI, 19 years here real soon. And I was talking to Chris about, what salt to use and this and that. And of course, at that point in time, he wouldn't let me get the salt that he was, because I didn't have the mixing time to use it because I had a small confined area. And I never realized how much a high quality salt that's balanced can make a difference in the system until I moved my facility out of the house and moved it into the farm. And I set it up, and it was with Chris's salt then. And the differences I saw in the animals immediately was mind blowing. I had corals that were, just spawning in the system. We found baby corals, torch corals mainly, just growing on the walls of the tanks where I never experienced that in the 5 years prior. And that sold me on having a good ionically balanced salt to start your system up. It might be more expensive, but what's more expensive? Putting a high quality balanced salt blend as the lifeblood of your system in your aquarium, or spending money on $500 boogers that won't make it because there's with your water parameters. In a way, I feel that, the industry has things backwards in a lot of ways. Is they will buy the cheapest product on the market to keep the most expensive animals alive. And I can't wrap my head around that in any way, shape, or form. Because if I were to do that, I wouldn't be a successful coral farmer and coral wholesaler with the way we do things. And I felt the pain of using a salt that was not balanced ionically, and it's a world of difference. And I think that that's the most important thing that somebody's setting up an aquarium, is that they get a very high quality ionically balanced salt. Chris has instilled this in me since I've known him, and it makes complete sense after seeing the results for myself. And doesn't mean these other salts don't work. And it's not what I'm saying. It's your investment. Protect your investment. You can pinch pennies here and there. Honestly, you should be pinching the pennies on somebody that's not gouging you for the cost of a coral over pinching the quality of the salt and the products that you're adding to your system to maintain them. Again, I think that the industry has things backwards. So I think it's very important to make sure that your salt blend that you're using is of high quality, high purity in the raw materials. And when you test it, you should be able to get, the majority of those minor and trace elements that are found in seawater should be present in that salt blend. And if they're not, it might not be, it could be a lot of reasons why it's not. But personally, I think that it's super important.
Just a couple of quick comments here. Thank you, Rogue Aquariums, for that super chat. Glad to see both Meckley and Chris Wood on the channel sharing their expertise once again. Also want to give a shout out to Ben. Did anyone notice that Keith stopped the show just for ski season? Let me address that false rumor. And I'm probably going to get 35 to 40 less ski days this ski season than I did the prior ski season when I had the show going full board. So
only 150 days of skiing versus
165, versus 200.
We had snow. We had 2 inches of snow last weekend.
Yeah,
we still have 60. It was 65 here today.
Yep. All right. So now Ben's got a comment here, and I wish there was a domestic ICP operation with realistic cost. We need to crowdsource you an ICP MS system. So Dong, somebody's making a suggestion there that you get into the ICP game.
Well, the upfront cost is really extremely. Yeah, well, actually, yeah, the ICPMS, yeah, I can do it, but the thing is that it's going to be cost a lot. So and also ICPMS for saltwater is very labor intensive. That is very important thing. It's a lot more labor intensive than ICP OES. So for a mass spec machine, and you really need to put in a lot of prep work for the sample. And for example, that if you bring a saltwater sample to a commercial, actually not the hobby grade, but the real one, to do an ICP-MS, they will probably just just shut the door on you, and yeah, because it's without those extensive labor, it's very easy to ruin the $500,000 machine, and also won't get you the accurate result. So ICP-MS is very labor intensive. So that is why that it probably costs about $1,200 if you want to do maybe a handful of element accurately. Yeah, but that I think that is really out of the range of our hobby. So $800 to $1,200 per water sample, and that mostly because it's a labor cost, is to prep the sample, and that
Let me work a question in from Andrew Sandler. So I'm there, Andrew. As long as we're talking about salts, thoughts on the iron in anti-caking and manganese is many of the mag sulfate, as well as lithium levels in many U.S. salts.
We do not use any sodium chloride with anti-caking agents specifically, and I have not used them going back to now 2006 when I made that fundamental change. We don't use anti-caking agents at all, at all. So that's not an issue as far as our stuff is concerned. I will just say one thing. I don't like making salt. We don't make any money off of salt. Nothing really to speak of. I do it as a labor of love. I do salt specifically for Chris because he and I are so super close. Now we do salt for obviously it's available.
You do it for me too, man.
Yeah, but what I do for you and what
not
I do
nearly
for
the kind
else
of
is I do the 4-part, which makes it so that anyone who has just a little bit of time can go ahead and put that together, and it's going to be the same every single time as long as your measurements are accurate. But with Chris, what I do, because shipping cost is such a massive issue from us to Florida, I do all of his as one and you're done dry blends. So he pours everything into his vat and he adds sodium chloride on his end. And then it pops out as being the same exact thing every time. Before anybody asks, no, I won't do that for anyone else on planet Earth. Because that is a massive labor undertaking. Yeah, he's grandfathered in, but if he ever sells ACI, whoever buys it from him, they're screwed. I'm not doing it. Yeah.
Well, most people would look at the cost of it and say they can get salt cheaper, and that's not what I look at.
Absolutely.
Of course you can.
It's expensive. I mean, what I use in our salt is expensive. We use USP grade stuff. We use super high quality materials. I mean, really nothing that goes into any of the salt or any of our stuff in general is less than like 98.5%. And that's for the salt. For the rest of the things that we do, it's not generally lower than 99.5. So it's expensive. This is not low end salt that's made with, I don't know what. I know exactly what goes into this stuff, and it's not inexpensive. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Let me ask all you guys a question. Concerns about high lithium. I mean, Andrew mentioned that, the lithium in many U.S. salts. There was another salt that I was using prior to using your salt, Chris, that did have high lithium levels. I've been told over and over again not to worry about, high lithium levels in salts. But do any of you guys have any, concerns if you get an ICP back or it says you're high in lithium?
I don't generally look at ICP lithium values as being anything of major concern because it's almost always elevated. And the majority of the interpretations that I do are for people who are just contacting me and saying, please run the numbers and let's see what the next master dosing solution comes up. They're not contacting me and saying, help, everything's dying. Look through this analysis and see what you think. In that case, I'm looking through it, and the interpretation platform, I'll call it, identifies everything that's in excess relative to the standardized value, which means that if the value is higher than it would be in seawater with that exact same salinity of that sample, then it's determined to be in excess. Something like lithium could be a couple of 100% or more in excess. And still you don't have people losing coral and thinking that it's lithium related.
Wouldn't lithium kind of just slow everything down anyhow? I mean, isn't that what it is? Lithium
It makes the
is
fish
used
happy.
Yeah.
It decreases aggression in certain
That's what I'm
kinds
getting
of wrasse and angelfish.
I mean, it is something that is prescribed by doctors for people that have hyperactivity. So
it could be.
So if you got fast growing corals, it can kind of slow them down a little bit.
Maybe. I guess I don't want to find out, but somebody wants to tell me what happens. I'm sure there's somebody out there that'll figure it out.
So after you stab the coral, then you can dose some lithium.
There you go.
After I stab the coral, I want that thing to grow. So
I want to thank the Reefability app so much for that very, very generous super chat. Wow. I didn't know like an app could actually watch YouTube and do super chats, but apparently apps can do that shit. So wow, so excited to see you back. This is an essential show for the reef community, and now it's even more powerful having a co-host like Dong and starting with A-list guests like Chris Wood and Chris Meckley. Thank you. I think that's Andy. I think that's Andy who's masquerading as a Reefability app, but maybe. Go ahead, Dong.
I did do a little bit research, literature research on lithium. So it seems it's not related to biological activity of coral. So it's very similar to sodium. So I think it's just some impurity from the sodium chloride that coming in, and I don't think that it has any side effect that has been standing out. And also lithium actually is not listed as a pollutant either in the ocean. So some of the area that definitely have elevated lithium, but it seems that scientists, they don't care about lithium. So maybe we can just relax a little bit about the lithium. That's my personal opinion. And another thing is that about the salt, of course, that majority of us, the hobbyists, basically just go for whatever is convenient for the salt. So that's why I'm doing one experiment right now. Actually, I redo it again. So you can see that this system is Tropic Marin Pro. And the system behind me is the Requisite. So both of them has been running like that for at least a couple of months. So I will keep doing that to see that if there's any significant difference in long run, because that is probably the two end of the commercial consumer grade salt for regular hobbyists. So the Tropic Marin Pro is supposed to be on the high end, and then the Requisite is the least expensive one, but is also the most accessible one. Many people in US actually, many of the customers I know that they just use the Requisite or the Tropic Marin Pro. That's the two major brand of salt. So that's why I'm redoing this experiment and to see if there's actually any measurable difference in terms of coral color, coral growth. And one thing so far I can find out about the difference about the salt is because Tropic Marin salt is anhydrous salt. That means that the salt is there's less water incorporated into the salt. So for the same amount of like 160 gallon, so the Tropic Marin is 10 pounds lighter That's what I found. So you actually pretty
Makes
good for my
sense.
back. Yeah, that's pretty significant.
More bang for your buck.
Not really. That yeah, actually,
Everything.
if I go to see a doctor, then yeah, definitely that 10 pounds definitely save a little bit on my back.
Back to Chris saying he will never make the salt for anybody but me. I'm actually glad to hear him say that because you know, I've gotten complacent with this salt, and it is all anhydrous, and anhydrous mag chloride is about I don't know, so 5-6 kilos worth of mag chloride for a 50-pound bag of salt. And when I mix that up, I put the whole gear all the way on, face mask, everything. And I've actually gotten complacent and had some nasty burns from an entire chunk of that mag chloride dumping into the water and exploding in front of me one day.
Yeah, it's a violent exothermic reaction. And I mean violent.
Extremely.
Extremely. When I mean violent, like if you were to pour a pail of that into a drum, it would vaporize in your face and probably shoot a few feet into the air.
Ooh, yes.
So you got to be, and I say this because I just finished mixing some. Yeah. So
it takes forever to cool too.
I do Chris's mix as completely dry, but for everybody else on planet Earth, they get the 4-part. So you get two liquids and 2 dries, and there is no exothermic reaction occurring for you because I've already done it. You know, so that way you get the same ionic signature every time, and there's no heat associated with any of it. You're just mixing it up and off.
Liability for you, Chris, is just, you know, I mean, all you have to do is have somebody that doesn't listen to what your directions say, and that
never happens.
Try and never, of course,
people always read the directions. Yeah, of course. For somebody like me, that's awful because I'm so verbose, and I'm trying to keep everybody aware of A, how to use something, and B, how to stay safe with it. And so I know I say a lot, but for everyone out there watching this who uses my product, please read the label. All of it. Please read the label once. Just read it once. Read it once while you don't have something else going on, you know, so you can absorb a little bit of it. If you know, just please do that for me.
It's important. How many phone calls I got from people saying, why do I only need to put 1 drop of this in, you know, why do I have to mix 1 drop of this in 100 mils of water? And then I'm like, okay, well,
because that's how strong it is.
Supercharged FAOF to them.
I get that all the time. People adding 1 full mil of isolate MT to 50 gallons of water, and I'm saying you're adding 100 times as much as you should be adding. You should be adding 1 drop per 100 to begin with, or something along those lines. 1 drop from that bottle, not a mil. A mil is 20 drops.
In sterile water, a sterile system, 1 drop of your iron would treat 2,300 gallons and make it natural
as an example, right? So
that's just one that I get people all the time.
That's another question that I had at iron, but let me just do a couple of quick thank yous. Adam Moore, thank you so much for that super chat. Dongzo is a national treasure. There's a fan for you, Dong.
So it means that I belong into the museum.
There you go. Thank you also, Reef Roy. So who else we got in the house here? I see Charles Delbake. Hey, Charles, what's happening,
Charles.
man? When does the actual talk start?
Charles the other day.
Charles, I got you on the slate there, so we'll be in touch.
One of my favorite authors, him and Julian. I love those books. Those are my favorite books.
Rich Ross has an interesting comment for Mr. Meckley. Meckley needs to drink high lithium tank water.
Interesting thought.
Back to the lithium.
That's an interesting
I don't know if
idea.
You can calm me down though.
I want to say hi to Remy Bahama Llama Coral. What's happening there, Remy?
Remy?
Congrats on the new gig at Brightwell. Okay, Dong, do you did you want to let me ask the question about iron, and then Dong, maybe I'll throw it to you in terms of a question from you. But so Chris, you mentioned iron, and I think a lot of us know that iron precipitates out very quickly in reef tanks. And go ahead, Chris, you had a.
But does it precipitate out, or does it get utilized? I mean, I think it gets utilized, not precipitating. I think
it depends entirely on the form of the iron.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it depends on the form of the iron. Iron compounds are more or less stable depending on pH range and a number of other factors. But if you're using an appropriate type of iron, it will remain viable in alkaline conditions for a longer period of time. You can't paint with a broad brushstroke there. You've got to be specific about what kind of iron is going in. If you're using iron chloride or something along those lines, then yeah, it's going to precipitate really fast. But I'm not going to say any more about that because I consider that proprietary information.
So my question is, pretty much every ICP I've gotten back says that I have 0 iron despite me dosing iron. Okay. So at what point are you going to be overdosing iron if you just keep getting back zeros in your ICPs?
Okay, so this is a great example of a question that really needs to be looked at, or a point. If the resolution of the ICP doesn't meet the concentration that you're looking for, then it could very well be there at a concentration up to or less than their maximum degree of resolution. So if you are getting an ICP performed by a service where the resolution of that analysis won't read that low, that doesn't mean you don't have iron. What it means is they can't detect it. And so if you are talking about stuff like iron and cobalt, where the concentrations in seawater are really, really low, then those two are wonderful examples of ions where you're not going to see them show up unless you are at a really elevated concentration. And it could be 1,000 or 2,000% above the natural seawater value, specifically for something like cobalt, where you're talking like a really tiny, tiny amount. So likely they're not going to see it at those concentrations, but it's there if you're adding it. Now, if you're not adding it on a continual basis, or you're adding it at a rate that doesn't meet the rate of depletion in the system, then you're going to wind up in a situation where, yeah, it's not there. You're not going to know. The way that you will, I guess, practically and pragmatically figure out, do you have it going in there, is by you're looking at the coloration of some of the animal or the coral, or excuse me, if you've got macroalgae growing, for instance, if you got a scrubber, you'll see a change in the coloration of primary producers like that when you've got iron in the system. Cobalt is going to be very, very difficult to isolate what's the difference. But you watch that. You watch your pH values. Are your pH values gradually lowering if you've got a scrubber going and you're not dosing with those critical elements? It's likely that if iron is biolimiting in a system like that, you add it, 2 things should occur. 3 things, technically. A, the nutrient concentrations should come down, assuming that there are not other biolimiting nutrients that are below the necessary values. 2, the dissolved oxygen content would theoretically increase. And 3, the pH value, the max pH value, will probably increase. So you can infer using those things, that you've got adequate iron going into the system, for instance. But if you're dosing it on a routine basis, as a lot of people are using drip dosing, then if they're overdosing and still nothing is showing up, it's likely that they're just using an ICP that is not capable of reading those low concentrations. It's not a matter of precipitating necessarily. It's a matter that you're not looking with a big enough magnifying glass to see what's there.
Yeah, I think this is very true. Because actually precipitating out of the water, I think that's a lesser concern, because that the iron that required to fulfill all the biological activity is tiny, very, very small amount. So even the iron carbonate, because that mostly that our seawater is filled with high level of carbonate, that's alkalinity. So iron carbonate still have sufficient solubility to provide that tiny little bit of iron, which plays a humongous important function. So and another thing is that when you do ICP test, normally they send you this plastic vial. So during that week's transit, with the temperature fluctuation, and then your iron most likely just heats to the plastic wall of that vial. And when they shoot it in an ICP OES machine, and depends on what kind of tubing they use, the iron, whatever left over, the tiny amount of iron will be just latched onto the plastic tubing. So you end up with basically not detectable. But without iron, if your reef tank is really depleted of iron, and you're looking at a disaster there. So you can clearly see that your coral are dying because iron is responsible for so many biological functions. So there's almost impossible that a tank has a zero iron. So that is why just like Chris said, it's important to just dose a little bit periodically to it, and it just to make sure that there's sufficient amount of iron exists. Yeah. Well, the thing is that even though that your ICP shows there is zero, and your coral is still alive and kicking, and also display some good color, yeah, the iron is there. So in the ocean, there's unlimited supply of iron because that, yeah, it's like 100% water change every millisecond. So even though the iron level is so low, but then you have this low level of iron constantly supplied to the coral. But that probably is a little bit different in the reef tank. So dosing some iron, even just blindly dosing some iron, can yeah, I think it is beneficial, especially if you're doing a lot of water change. And in a salt mix, iron definitely is there, because that iron actually is the #1 most important trace metal for coral. Basically, according to the review paper, and the function of iron is just all over the board for all sorts of enzyme activity. So yeah, just like Chris said, well, how much the ICP really telling you the story about iron is highly dependent on how they handle the sample. And that bring up another question, is that if you can do a local ICP test, maybe it's much better. Just like Chris Meckley, right? You and your ICP lab is really not that far away.
No.
Yeah.
And you were talking about, the plastic tube to pull the sample into the machine. If they're using plastic tubes to pull the sample into the machine, then I would never use that company ever again, because I learned enough about it when Gene started Reef Labs that everything that he uses from the time the sample is pulled, it's a glass tube that goes down inside the sample vial, and then it's a curling glass line that goes all the way to the nebulizer. And the nebulizer is glass as well. That from the time the sample is pulled, if the company that is doing the ICP analysis is using plastic, then they're doing you an injustice for the money that you're spending on their test, because it's not the way to do it, to pull the sample into the system. And I know for a fact that Gene at Reef Labs does it that way, and he pulls his samples. Everything's done, with glass, all the way from the sample to the nebulizer to the plasma generator that pulverizes the sample. That's very important. And I mean, I don't know what other companies do. I'm sure that if they're, I'm sure they know what they're doing, so they're probably using glass as well. But
and also that the transit time from the sample to the ICP lab. So basically, all I see these days that when you say in a commercial ICP, many of them are just plastic tubes. So
well, that might be the transport tube, but I guess you'd have to I guess it depends in terms of whether they use the glass for the actual test, which I assume they do.
But the transport tube is the problem.
Is that the if that's where it could adhere to the
because
sides.
you're going to the sample going to sit in that plastic tube for a week.
There's a lot of different types of those tubes though too, and I know that when 4 years ago, when I was really getting into the ICP, I remember Gene changed his plastic tubes 4 different times because he found that there's a particular tube that's manufactured that has a particular coating on the inside of it that does not allow the plastic to absorb the elements. And when he started using those tubes, he saw a huge difference in the results from his tests, especially with a lot of the minor elements that were in, 1 part per billion and lower. He was actually finding that before they weren't present because pretty much they were absorbed into the tube. Plus, there's also an acid that's put into the tube in the sample first off, which will help to extract any of the absorption that happens. It'll help extract it from the tube, which is something I know that is done at Reef Labs, but I don't know what other companies are doing. And that's, one of the reasons why, plus, the reason why I use Gene so close, he's a friend of mine, and, I get my results in 24 hours, which is, pretty important to me. With that, I'm spoiled with that aspect, and I send one on just to do a double check. It's a week later. I'm going, when's this thing coming back?
Just a couple of quick thank yous to Remy, man. Thank you for that super chat. Comment is Moki, you're up. All right. Have a little war here, super chats. And also want to thank Rob B from upstate New York. Thanks, Rob, man. Appreciate the support. You've always been a great supporter of the show. Glad to see you back. One more bowling week to go. Tuesdays is his bowling night, so that's been conflict in the past. Dog, let me throw it to you. I know that you had a bunch of questions for these guys as well in terms of other things we want to talk about in terms of ICPs and trace elements.
Yeah. So I think that one of the things in my mind is that we are analyzing ICP test normally is a lot of elements for the same amount of money. Then what happened that if there is a group of elements, maybe like the Fantastic 8 or Fantastic 4, something like that, for only analyze a limited amount of element that is critical, the most critical one. So in that case, that you know that ICP test is a labor intensive, and so then you're paying the same amount of money if you analyze much less elements. Maybe potentially can improve your accuracy. Is that possible?
From what I know about it, it doesn't matter what you test for. Every time you fire up the machine, you still have to use argon, you still have to use nitrogen, you still have to use all the gases and in the exact same amounts, whether you're testing for 36 elements or 80 elements. You're still using the same amount of those gases. So the main expense for the testing is the electricity to run the machine, of course, and you got the liquid argon tanks that are quite expensive and the liquid nitrogen tanks to shoot into the samples when they're being pulverized by the plasma. So it's not going to make a difference in cost if you're testing one element or if you're testing 100 elements. It's a matter of whether your machine is actually able to give you the details on all those elements accurately. And it's not going to make a difference if it's 1 or 100.
So that if the machine is calibrated for less element, would that be possible to give you a better result for those selected elements?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer for that one. I do know that from all the experience that I've had talking back and forth, dialing in individual elements is quite difficult, and the reason why there's no MS availability for Reef Labs is because he gets better accuracy out of the OES from all the years of using it and figuring out the ins and outs and the reasons why certain interferences happen and how to eliminate those interferences. But with the mass spec, yes, you can test your halogens better, and that's super important for me. That's one of the only reasons why I use another company once in a while, is so I can test my fluorine. I think that's an important element to have in the system, and that's one thing that Gene cannot test is the fluorine. And when he goes to do the testing with the MS, he doesn't get the accurate results he's looking for out of fluorine because it is a difficult element to test. And that's why he has never pursued going farther with the mass spec, because he's actually got it dialed in where the OES can get him in the parts per trillion on iron and cobalt, which are two of the elements that are, like Chris was talking about, that are way below what most OES machines can actually read. But the way Gene had figured out. And being a physicist, he's got ways of, I don't know how he does these things, but he's got it down where he measures it in the parts per trillion versus just parts per billion. And, that's important. But running the machine the cost is the cost. So are you going to get more accuracy out of doing less elements? I'll have to ask him about that because I didn't have an answer for you. I couldn't tell you.
So in your experience, because you're running Toro Farm, a successful one, so if you only, what is the most important, like the top 5 or top 10 traits that you actually will focus on first?
I focus on iron, manganese, cobalt, vanadium, and copper. They're the ones that I make sure are always in the correct ranges. Mainly what I see vanadium's up there as well. It's not, I don't think vanadium's as, it's not, I can't replace vanadium with copper or copper with vanadium. Because I have noticed differences. I can tell in my system that I keep the majority of my gonies, and I can tell when my manganese is low and when my vanadium is low. It's always both of them at the same time. I've always had deficiencies in both of them at the same time. Very rarely does vanadium show up and manganese not show up, or vice versa. I don't understand that. It's way beyond. I guess it's part of the unknowns that we might not ever understand. But when my gonioporas aren't polyped out like they are when those levels are present, and I see that they're retracted, I can go and dose some vanadium and some manganese, and within 24 hours, the polyp extension is right back to where it used to, where it should be. That's pretty cool to see. I mean, you don't believe it until you actually see it, but that's probably something most people are like, yeah, that's a bunch of BS. But until you experience it, just from my experience, I'm not saying something that I haven't experienced on my own. And people that I've also talked to about, specific species like gonioporas, and they say they have no, polyp extension is not as good as it used to be. And when they do a water change, it seems to get better for a day, and then it seems to go back down. I say, well, dose vanadium and dose manganese, actually dose minor and traces in general, and you'll see them, really be happy. And so that's what I say. My favorites.
Do you see that the gonies color change after you dose manganese?
I haven't noticed any color change. The gonies that we have growing on the farm, they don't shift in color at all. The only time I see them shift in color is if I take fragments and put them directly under a metal halide, and then I seem to get much more vibrant colors out of them than if they're just under the T5s.
Metal halides, huh?
He said it. He used the dirty words.
You will not.
That's another show.
Look better than a metal halide.
I told you could not keep him off of.
All right, we're at the 60-minute mark. That was a great show, guys. Come back again. We'll love to have you on.
It's all over.
Thank you.
I'm kidding. I knew this. That was a pipe dream, but go ahead, Don.
Wait, you wasted the first 10 minutes talking about, starting up the whole thing. So we got another 10
only
minutes.
45 minutes in, technically.
I didn't mean that by that. I didn't mean wasted it. You took up the first 10 minutes.
No, I know. I knew that was going to be hoarding that first part of the show. Kind of explaining myself. Quickly before Don, I just want to thank Final Mac for that super chat. Thank you for coming back, Keith. All the popular Reef podcasters quit at the same time. Yours was the most consistent with great content. Hit that button, everybody. Thank you there. Appreciate that. And hey, our buddy Chris Meckley, Joseph, commenting about the ICPs coming back in 24 hours, saying that would be very, very sweet. Yeah, that is for sure something.
I'm spoiled, bro. It's literally about 10 miles away.
All right, Dong, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think that when we are talking about the short transit time for ICP, I think that actually plays probably a really important role for you, Chris. So you get the data is a lot more reliable than a sample sitting in a trans all the way overseas, experience all the temperature fluctuation, sitting in a plastic tube.
Big time.
So For matter of fact, that I have in my hand, and then this is a review article published in 2023. It basically reviewed it like over 200 or probably more of paper ever published about trace metals in terms of how they function in coral, which I think is a wonderful piece of review paper. Also, they found out something is a coincidence. Actually, maybe it's not really a coincidence. So in my hand, this is a Chris Woods isolated MT. So the funny thing is I look at this paper, I look at the label of this thing. So besides the iodine, of course, that the iodine is not a metal. And this, well, this is not commercial, okay? I just what I find as a curiosity of as a scientist.
It's a hell of a coincidence. That's all you're saying.
It's a hell of a coincidence. Is that there's not one more, not one less about all the critical metal that is well documented in the paper. 100% hit rate. Yeah. So that's why I'm going to try this. So I'm not a trace element doser, okay? So I've been trying out iron and manganese. Well, just put some in, that kind of thing. Mostly is for that big red garnet that Keith gave me. That's what it is for. So before I found this research paper, my observation of that garnet, that's actually is probably is the only large garnet colony I have. So I'm an SPS guy. So
me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
So that garnet always have a great polyp extension, and that is because I use tap water. Well, God forbid. Oh, well, don't duplicate that, because that the water, my tap water, is unique because it's produced by our tank, and the water source is very good. So that's why. But don't try tap water.
So you got some magical tap water there, huh, Dong?
Oh, actually, yeah, it is, because in our tap water, the two elements stands out. Actually, it's naturally occurring. Is iron and manganese.
Really?
Yes.
That's pretty common in a lot of groundwater.
In New England, yeah.
So, exactly. Yeah, in New England.
And also that I got 2 ppm of fluoride.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah. So
2 ppm of fluoride, but that's because the town put that in there.
Yeah, the town put them in there. But yeah, so that's why that I do quite a bit of water change, and I think that I'm pretty okay. Yeah, 2 ppm. Fine. Yes.
It's a little higher than seawater. Yeah, 1.292
I don't know
ish.
1.292. Yep.
Yeah. So 2 is just approximately about that range. So so that I also do a little bit of more iron and manganese. Just try a little bit in the past several months, and try to see if I can try to see the response for that big Keith Scarnipora.
I lost that my gun. I'm gonna have to get a frag of that back from you.
I can't, because it doesn't fit through my frag saw. That is now become a giant basketball size.
I'll bring a handsaw.
I'll come up and cut it for you.
You cannot, because Scarnipora has a Scarnipora toxin, and that is the first marine toxin being studied in the 70s. And Scarnipora toxin is extremely potent. So of course it's not as bad as the paddy toxin, but Scarnipora toxin can basically is pretty toxic. So that is why that I frag coral for other people except Scarnipora. No garnet for me.
Really? So hold it. You're saying that? So what can happen? I mean, how does that toxin potentially impact humans?
Well, in the laboratory, I don't see any human data, because probably that's never been tried before. But a fish through a Scarnipora, if I remember correctly, a fish size of Scarnipora can kill 500 rats. Each rat is 250 grams in size.
Okay, so
that potent.
I need to interject. We have a farm here, and we have a rat problem in the middle of the forest. So you're telling me that all I have to do is get a fist-sized Ghani from Meckley and leave it out there, and if they start licking it, the rat problem goes away. I can probably get 2 of those and reliably get rid of all of the rats.
Yes,
wonderful.
I think that's a good idea, but I think
Hey,
the
natural
cat
means
also
of getting rid of
in
rats
danger.
versus.
I think it's a good idea. As long as the dogs don't lick it, we're good. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing is that I really hesitate to frag that Garni, and right now that Garni is actually occupying 1/4 of the tank space. And then that
Yeah,
tank
that's a beautiful
is
I'll
really
come up
big.
and
It's
frag it
beautiful.
for you when I come up for a reef retreat. I'll just come over and I'll cut it for you. I got no problems cutting a Goniapora. I won't even put a mask on or put gloves on. It don't bother me.
So that when I add a little bit manganese and iron into that tank just for that Garni, one thing that I see is that because I already have some iron and manganese in the water to begin with, the addition a little bit more is just icing on the cake. So what I found out is that, yeah, the polyp extension is slightly better, but it's not significant. But the color of that Garni turned to deep red. It come from more like on the pinkish red side. Right now, it's really vibrantly red. So, and also in this paper, it definitely talk about how the vanadium and manganese, how they affect the biological pathway. So that thing is real. So yeah, it's not no longer some observation antidote of observation, but actually there's a scientific background, scientific rationale behind it. That's why I'm getting this.
Yeah.
That's what I started with.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, when you and I first put our heads together and you started using that in the farm, I remember vividly you telling me about the rate of increase of growth that you were getting in some of this stuff. And it was significant. Not just significant in terms of the rate of growth, but the number of corals that it was significant.
It was amazing because we started using algae scrubbers about 6 months prior to it was about a year because you came back into the scene in 2020 and I had scrubbers on the system for over a year and I was pulling my hair out trying to find a minor and trace supplement that I could utilize instead of individually dosing each element. And I couldn't find one that was doing what I needed it to do. And that's why your first rendition of MT was isolate turf MT. And it was for algae turf scrubbers because of the amount of depletion from your minor and trace elements that comes about by using an algae turf scrubber. Right. And I remember over a period of, I think, 6 or 8 months, you and I were going back and forth because I was, doing ICP tests on a weekly basis. And we were noticing that the turf MT was working, but it was working too good. It was putting too much of certain elements into it. So I remember you reformulated a handful of times and then you ended up with just isolate MT at the very end because, it got to the point where it was a great additive for anybody to utilize, even if you're not using a turf scrubber. And it's taken off since there. I mean, there were so many people that were jumped on board with the isolate MT when it first came available. And it was finally, when you finalized how you were going to formulate it. And isolate MT has been the basis of our solution that we dose in all of our systems for the first 3 years of dosing minor and trace elements on I didn't even put it on a dosing pump until 3 years into it. And we've been doing it for 5 years now. And it took till about 3 years of me finally feeling comfortable and putting the concoction together and dosing it 24/7 for 30 days. And then ICP rebooting it and changing the formulation and chasing my minor and trace elements because I had this goal of becoming ionically balanced where all my elements were perfect. There was no elevations, no depletions, and I achieved it for about a month. And then I just chased it after that. And now I'm just happy with that last when I finally achieved it. I don't chase my minor and traces anymore. And I just use the same formulation of the amount of minor and traces that I was putting in my concoction as I did from 3 years ago. And I stopped trying to figure out how to dial it in 100% because I realized that it's a pipe dream.
So a couple of things, just quickly. You do this because you're growing coral and that's your business. And so you actually have to be using stuff that has an impact, a positive impact on your outcome. And so this is not just a matter of dosing elements into the system for the purpose of saying, yes, I know that I'm putting these things and I know they're important. It's more of a matter of looking at the results and saying what I'm trying to achieve is some improvement in color intensity or in growth rate, or both of those things, because both of those things are important to what you do. So from a practical perspective, you're putting it in there, not again to just say, I know they're going in there, but you're looking at the corals themselves and noticing if this is not going in there, this is the impact. When I do put it in and I'm good about it, then I know this was the difference. I started here and I ended up here after using this stuff. So it's, this is not meant to come off as being any kind of a marketing thing, because it's not. The critical thing is putting those elements in and actually seeing the impact that they're having on the system. It doesn't matter what ratios you put in. MT just happens to be one that works really, really well, but those rates of depletion for all of those elements are nonlinear in every single system because of the difference in the corals that are there, the difference in the amount of dissolved organic material. I mean, everything, the filtration, and on, the biological makeup of the cohort within that system. It's an imperfect solution, but it's a solution that's perfect enough.
Exactly.
But the point is that you're actually seeing results by applying stuff like that.
I think that there is about one research paper I found is that they study 4 different types of corals. That one is Acropora hyacinthus, and then another one is a Prosopora, and then another one I think is a Halides, and plus one more is actually a LPS. I forgot the name of it. So they map the trace element consumption for all 4 different types of coral. They're dramatically different. They're just day and night. Yeah, they have the circle drawing, the barely any overlapping.
Right.
So each species of coral actually require the trace element requirement is so dramatically different. I don't think that we'll ever be able to find out a perfect solution. So that's why somewhere in between is good enough. That's my take of it.
Couple of comments. Salem, Tapner Salem, perfect is the enemy of good, but perfect is an amazing dream. Yep. And then Charles is saying, don't let perfect get in the way of good enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's very good.
Good enough. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And that's where I got to the problem. I wanted it to be perfect, and I had this. I mean, I was chasing those minor and trace elements to be perfect for 3 years, and when I finally got to the point where I thought they were perfect, and I didn't change my solution, then they got all imbalanced out again, and I'm just like, I'm done. I know what I'm adding. I say to everybody that wants to do minor and trace elements, dose it, change your solutions, for the first 6 months, and if your tank is a mature aquarium, and you're happy with the results that you're getting, after 6 months of changing that, using Chris's ICP calculator or any other way of adjusting the amount of the minor and traces you're putting into your system on a monthly basis, once you're happy with the results that you see, but you continue to say, well, I still have to change that every single month, stop. Just be happy that you're adding these elements and you've seen the results that you're looking for, because you know for a fact that they're going in on a daily basis if you're dosing them with a dosing pump. And if you continue to chase them like I did, I got to realize that the amount of manganese and the amount of other things, I mean, I was looking at it, well, I started to figure out a way to save money on reefing. And now I'm looking at it going, well, shit, this is going to get expensive if I continue up it. And I'm not seeing really any different results by adding more and more and more to that concoction. So once like I said, 3 years, I'm fine with where my dosing is, and I haven't changed it. And I think my ICP results come back almost every single time with a lot of deficiencies. And I know for a fact that they're going in the system. And why are they showing deficient when they were dialed in for a long time? I don't know. Is it because of the bacterial population has been boosted because there's minor and traces that were never present before and there's species of bacteria growing in there? Aquabiomics told me, yes, that could be exactly the reason why. If you stop dosing them, does that population deplete? Aquabiomics showed me, yes, that is exactly what happens. So, once you get to a particular point where you're happy with your results from minor and trace dosing and your corals look amazing and you're super happy with them thriving, just don't change it from there on out, is my opinion. Because it's just you can go into problems by overdosing an element. And it doesn't take much when you're talking about parts per billion, parts per trillion. I mean, I thought it was crazy when I think I even talked to you, Chris, about this, going, well, why is it that your iron concentration is 1 drop in 2,345 gallons will get you to natural seawater parameters? I get that sterile in a sterile environment, but why am I adding 1 mil a day?
Yeah, because your rate of depletion is obviously very, very elevated. Yeah, this is what we're talking about. The difference in the system's rate of depletion of all these elements changes with time. And so you're going to find that overdosing something, and I'm not using overdose in the parlance of saying catastrophic overdose. I'm saying you're adding more than is actually required. That's technically overdosing, but not in a way that's resulting in loss of life.
Right.
Those rates of depletion are going to change with time. And this is how reefing has been and aquarium husbandry has been forever. If what you're doing works for you, then continue doing that. Stop making changes to the system. Don't change out your lighting or your protein skimmer or anything else. If everything's growing nicely and you're happy with the way things are looking, then you're on the right track. And
exactly.
And as Chris is saying, again, understand from a farming perspective, there is a livelihood tied up here. It's not, I came home from the office today and things look a little bit different. If you're looking at these systems 18 hours a day, then you are, and this is what you rely on, then you're really paying attention closely. If that thing works for you, then yeah, let it ride.
And the other thing about minor and trace dosing, people ask me all the time, how much of this should I do? How much of that should I do? And I say, listen, you need to go and look at the calculator and start off with a base dosing for what you need to do. And your system's different. I'm not there to monitor it. I'm not there to observe it. You need to observe it yourself. And for all these out there that want to do this, you need to be very vigilant and look at your animals. Your animals will tell you everything you need to know about them. Yeah. I don't know why I knew this forever. And, 5 years ago, Chris said that to me and I'm like, damn, I forgot all about that. You're right. Look at the animals. The animals will tell you everything you need to know and whether you're doing something wrong. And when people say you can't run an alkalinity of 13.6, okay, go tell my corals that. You can't run your copper level at 14 parts per billion. Okay, go tell my corals that. It's you have to observe. And if you're going to be a reefer, if you're not observing your animals and you're asking questions about this number and you're worried about the numbers over the observation of your corals, sorry, but you're not going to be successful because it's going to hurt you by chasing numbers versus looking at your corals. And minor and trace element dosing is a perfect example of stop chasing the numbers when you know you're adding a fair amount of each of the elements to your system on a daily basis. If your corals look amazing, great. If they don't, revisit it. If there's nothing elevated, then there's something else that's an underlying issue and you need to figure it out your own, because I can't figure it out. Most other people can't figure it out. We can brainstorm about it, but there's so much that we aren't told when somebody's asking us questions. And it's probably one of the biggest problems with the industry is people think that somebody like me, somebody like Chris, or somebody that's been doing this for a long time can help somebody fix the problems in their aquarium, when most of the time there's a lot of variables that are being left out that we don't know about, and it's just happen.
Yep. So, Chris, I have a question that are always in my mind thinking about that. So it seems that how much impact is macroalgae like the refugium to the trace element? It seems to be like, according to the research I've read, and the macroalgae actually is competing for the trace element. So basically, when people are dosing a lot of manganese and iron, basically they are feeding the macroalgae. Sure. So yeah, and that's ever since I stopped using any macroalgae and as a refugium for years, and the coral just grows much better than the time that when I have have Refugiums. So what's your take on that? How do you look at Refugium? Is it really counterproductive in terms of trace element?
You can answer that. The Chris's, you guys can answer that question based on scrubbers because you like scrubbers.
I'll make it brief. I don't believe in Refugiums. I've used Refugiums. I've had a Refugium in every one of my systems at my private home, and I never saw any kind of nutrient reduction that I was looking for. Yeah. The only thing that I ever thought that a Refugium did was create a lot of pods that would eventually be dumped back in the system. And it was a great way to do a reverse lighting cycle so I could keep my pH from being as suppressed. That's the only thing I ever thought a Refugium was any good for, because it does not reduce, it never reduced the phosphates. It never reduced my nitrates. I think you have to have such a massive size Refugium to the size of your reef aquarium in order for it to actually have any impact on it. It might keep things more stable, but I don't think you're going to get reduction like people think you're going to get. Now, when you talk about an algae turf scrubber, that's a completely different animal, because the algae turf scrubber is growing the algae you don't want growing on your reef in the scrubber instead of on your reef. So is it competing? Sure it is, but you're on a much smaller scale than what a Refugium with large numbers or large amounts of macroalgae are. You know, you're getting compact, straight to the point, kicking the algae or kicking the nutrients in the ass and getting rid of it for you, where Refugium is fighting your corals for the same things.
So what you are saying is that, if I understand correctly, because that the scrubber actually produce much less algae, so that is much less competition for the trace element for the coral, versus a gigantic Refugium that has tons of macroalgae that can be a direct competition for trace element for coral.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, think about, you know, my turf scrubber is what Josh called the 300, which is I have the commercials, which is 2 300s are about this big. There's a mat that the algae grows on that's about, I don't know, 8 or 10 inches by 8 or 10 inches, and that's the only place that nuisance algae that you don't want growing on your frag plugs, on your live rock, on everything. It grows inside of that scrubber. Where if you have a 55-gallon Refugium on a 70-gallon aquarium, you've got a massive amount of algae in there that is competing with your corals, where you only have that small area of algae that you never want to see on your reef, and it will always grow in the scrubber, because that's at least what we've observed. I mean, it took us 3 months of running scrubbers before the algae stopped growing in the main system, and now I haven't seen, knock on wood, haven't seen that nuisance algae just covering my frag plugs and my racks and everything since then. And I will never stop using an algae turf scrubber as long as I'm reefing, because I think they're an essential part of nutrient reduction. They made a world of difference for helping me naturally remove phosphates and keep nitrates in check. There's other means of removing phosphates. I don't agree with a lot of them, but then there's a new one that we just started playing around with, which is another whole episode that we won't even talk about right now. So don't go down.
You gotta say something. I mean, what is it?
There's a purple non-sulfur bacteria that's grown by hydrospace, and it's called Rhodopseudomonas plastris. And the observations that we've had for the last year and 4 months of using this, I no longer dose lanthanum chloride twice a week in my soft coral system, which is the system that I get, it receives 200 to 300, 400, 1,000 soft corals on a weekly basis, depending on how busy we are and how many shipments that I import and how many soft corals I have to take. Well, they break down when they're being shipped overseas. They're not as healthy. They're not as happy. So when you put them into the system, phosphates always spike. That's a given. Algae turf scrubbers, even 3-4 times the amount of algae turf scrubbers on that system were not enough to keep it from spiking up to above 1 ppm. Well, I talked to Ken many years ago out at the Jake Adams studio when he was live, and it was great to meet him. And finally, we were able to get to the point where he grew this stuff, and we utilize it now. And we were only, for the first year and 3 months, we were only dosing half of what Ken recommended, and we stopped dosing lanthanum almost completely, except for maybe every 3 to 4 weeks. And now I'm buying a cube, he's donating a cube, and we're dosing the full amount in the system. And my phosphate literally rises instead of 0.15 to 2.2 per day. It rises about 0.03 to 0.08 per day. So that's with a full dose of this stuff. It's a natural means of reducing your phosphates without having to add chemicals to your system. And anytime you can eliminate chemicals and do things the natural way, the turf scripts, the probiotics, makes a world of difference. It's actually cheaper for us to use the Rhodopseudomonas palustris than it is for us to use GFO or aluminum oxide or any of those other types of media that you can put in. You know, for one, you don't get the alkalinity suppression. It actually helps to boost the alkalinity because it actually helps to boost the pH because what the heck was the reasoning why? Ken was telling me, and I'm losing it. But bottom line, that's a whole nother episode. We'll stop talking about that one
now. I wanted to bring up a topic that we've sort of touched on, and that is using certain trace elements to dial in specific colors for corals. So, for instance, fluoride has been known to enhance blues with SPS. How I guess, you know, is that something that only expert reefers should be thinking about doing? You know, is that just kind of getting into
it ought to be in the salt in the first place, and then it would be less obvious. Fluoride has become quite an expensive component. And so inexpensive salt blends, it might only be there inadvertently because it comes in as an impurity and something that they're using. But the fact that bumping your fluoride up can result in blue intensification would indicate to me that there wasn't the natural seawater concentration of fluoride in there in the first place. So should expert reefers only be using it? No. There's one where I would say get an ICP run by somebody who can reliably tell you what that concentration is and then dose it accordingly, as opposed to just saying, well, I'm going to dose it until I see the blue coloration that I'm looking for. Don't do that. If you want to fiddle around with something that's going to drive blue coloration, increase your potassium and do that gradually. That seems to be one of those things where you can ramp that up quite a bit and the coloration of the corals will change as long as you're consistent. When you let that concentration drop back down, the corals will reattain their base coloration or pretty near. If you try screwing around with fluoride doing that kind of an experiment, it's probably going to result in some loss and potentially a lot of loss. So don't just, willy-nilly dose fluoride. Get an ICP done first and then watch the trend and be dosing according to, do you need to come up, and that'll work.
So I think that Chris has a great point about the fluoride dosing. Well, of course, I use tap water that I have no control of the fluoride. I do have the Blue Oregon Torque. But here's the thing. I cannot find any scientific literature talk about how fluoride actually impact coral's color. Because that, the scientific community, they don't care about the coral color at all. They care about the growth, the survival. Because that, for the restoration and fighting the coral reef loss, color is not a concern at all. But as a hobbyist, color become the most important thing of the coral. So I do find a paper published talking about fluoride, is that they consider fluoride as in the ocean is actually is an environmental pollutant. What happened is that they did an experiment in a laboratory by increasing fluoride. On top of my head is not, I don't recall the exactly concentration they reached to, but when I read the paper, it's not that shockingly high, like 1 ppm, that kind of thing. So what they found is that, but they only do it on one species of coral, though. They did it on, I think it's a Prosophora, So there's some fast-growing species. What happened is that what they found out is that with the fluoride concentration increase, the growth rate of the coral drops. It drops actually like 25% and more. So their conclusion is that fluoride actually is a pollutant. It's against coral growth. And they have all sorts of mechanism, whatever, talk about how the fluoride poisoning the coral. And especially for the skeleton building coral, somehow that the calcification get interfered by fluoride. That's what I remember from reading that paper. So that actually another thing that since we talk about the coral color and trace element, one thing what's in my mind, I want to get your opinion, your guys' opinion, is that the insane color we're seeing from the coral, so especially from Chris from Meckley, you import a lot of wild coral, and then you can see the transformation from a wild coral in your tank, the color change, all that kind of thing. Are these the color change of a coral? Is it a possibility actually is a stress response instead of when a coral gains more vibrant color? Does it really mean that it's healthier in terms of growth? Or actually, yes, a stress response, then they try to cope with the different living environment. And then the consequences that reduce the growth in terms of the energy they have to spend to cope with the environment. So is it possible that some of the vibrant color we're seeing from the coral after we provide them artificial living environment is actually that, of course, that including the trace element we put in your tank, like overdosing, that kind of thing. So what do you think about that? Is that the vibrant color really like for example, we see from what we've seen from the dosing fluoride, is a healthy response from the coral, or actually it's a stress response from the coral?
You want to go, or you want me
No, that's
to?
you.
Okay, so with
That's
wild imports, okay, here's what the study doesn't give you any real hard evidence of what they're saying, in my opinion, because this is my question to them. Do they actually import corals? Do they see corals in the wild? Then they collect them and put them into a captive system and see the degradation of the colors. In wild corals, when they're imported, they come in looking spectacular a lot of the times. And as they sit here in our systems, because we will never be able to, I'm talking about acropores in general. We will never be able to reproduce the amount of light that they're receiving. We'll never be able to reproduce the amount of wave action that they're receiving. And if we can reproduce the water quality, we at least got something that makes them somewhat happy. And if, to what you were saying about fluoride, them saying that fluoride is a pollutant, I would say that is only correct if it's above natural seawater levels, because if it's occurring in the ocean and it's 1.292 parts per million, and we have in our systems 1.452 parts per million.
That should be the same, right?
Well, I mean, that's actually a pretty significant increase when you break it down, because fluoride is, it can be a toxin. I mean, it can be toxic at elevated levels. I don't know what the elevated toxic level is of fluoride in a system. I have never achieved, above the 1.292 parts per million. But having that imbalance is a major issue, I would say, because then that can put stress on, because of it being a halogen. Just like if you have a way overdose of iodine, it's like you don't want to put a coral in an iodine dip and leave it sitting in there for 45 minutes. You're going to kill it,
Yeah.
Even if it's just slightly elevated than what it is. But, that's not how the normal case is with an iodine dip. That's just a point that I'm trying to make. So with this study, they're saying that, if I get this correct, they're saying that it's a pollutant and it's not necessary, but then they're not taking into consideration the fact that when you take a coral, see them have more vibrant colors in the wild, but then they darken in captivity. That's a stress response. The vibrant coloration is not a stress response, because that's what they're supposed to look like. The stress response is them not getting the conditions that they need. So if you don't have the right amount of flow on an acropore that comes from the wild, it's going to turn brown.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have the right amount of light on that coral, it's going to turn brown. Why is it turning brown? Because it's not getting the amount of nutrients that it needs from the symbiotic zooxanthellae algae in its tissue. So what does it do? It tells it, it allows it to produce more zooxanthellae for its tissue, and it causes it to brown out because of that. So flow and light can cause a coral to brown out. So for them to say that a vibrant, brightly colored coral, especially like an acropora, is stressed, I just don't think they have I think they're backwards. They don't know what they're talking about, because I see it firsthand. I mean, if these corals weren't stressed out, why the hell do they turn brown on me? Or why do they turn green? And then eventually in 6 months after they settle in and they're used to the conditions that they're living in, they finally then color back up to get their
You always hear these stories about going to a local fish store that perhaps doesn't have the best display tanks and has just a few corals in those display tanks, and they're brown corals like acropora or something like that. And perhaps those guys are not dialed in on SPS. And then when a seasoned hobbyist goes and sees this brown turd in the display tank and brings it home, performs some magic, then all of a sudden that brown turd turns into a gem.
First Superman Monty that I ever
a very
had.
vivid piece of mental imagery.
Yeah. So that just piggybacks what you're saying, Chris, in terms of
it's definitely not a stressed out coral when it's vibrantly colored. I can't see that being a logical explanation to it.
I see fluorescence as being something that probably has to do with a stress response. When fluorescence dramatically increases and the coral takes on this glassy appearance.
Oh, if it's pastel-y, I get that.
Yeah. Then I'm starting to think about the potassium value is way too high. That seems to be a fairly.
I'm with you on
common
that.
thing. Yeah.
I'm with you on that. It's like those old, back in the day, the old zeolite systems where they had that specific additive.
I wasn't going to use that word, but that, yeah.
Well, it caused the coral to expel the zooxanthellae so that they had that pastel-y look to them.
Right.
Those corals are stressed, and if they stop putting that particular additive in, then it allows the coral then to build the zooxanthellae up. And most of the time, a zeolite system that didn't have that additive going into it, all the corals turned brown on them because they were starved. And I never saw the polyp extension out of a system that was set up that way either. And I think, having the correct balance of light, flow, and water quality, you'll get corals, whether they're wild or whether they've raised in captivity for 10 years, they'll all eventually balance out and become extremely healthy. They just have to go through the process of adapting to their surroundings and their environment. I mean, corals adapt very well. I mean, that's been proven. They've been around for, millions and millions of years, and they're going to be around a hell of a lot longer than we will be here on this planet. They're going to adapt to the crappy LEDs that we give them. And their metal lives, they get
or not.
How do we get back into that topic?
We're talking about stress.
Ooh, start talking about Kalkwasser.
No, don't talk about Kalkwasser. I'm done.
Actually, when you talk about the crappy LED, and Acropora actually mostly under T5. Except this play tank, so I need the color.
Now, LEDs grow corals. People don't take me the wrong way. I mean, I don't believe in LEDs. I think they're superficial light, and I don't think that they're the right thing for my application. They'll grow corals perfectly fine. Not enough for me. And I see it all the time. I get corals that are sent from an LED grown tank, and they get an inch of growth a year, and then I get no growth in 2 years once I get it from an LED tank and put it in metal lights. They have to adapt back to natural light versus superficial light. And that's what I meant, is corals adapt extremely well, and it just takes time sometimes.
Here's a question from viewer Dan is asking, and so Chris Wood, you made the statement that you're not really motivated to make a lot of salt for people. So the question here is, are there any readily available salts that are recommended?
Well, mine's readily available, but it's just a pain in the ass to make. Yeah, I mean, you can find it. You can go online and find it. I mean, you can get it from Champion and from a number of authorized
Saltwater
dealers of any of the authorized reef blueprint dealers. And if you're buying large quantities, you need to be getting it from the online sales portal, because that is there for commercial sized applications. But it's
Well, let me pose the question this way. So I use Captivate salt. Meckley uses it. Dong, what about you? What
I
salt
use
do you use?
Requisol, and right now that part of it is Marin Pro.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
the way I'm thinking is that I try to use a salt that is common to hobbyists, because that the coral are growing in these tanks. Eventually, it's going to go to their new home. So 99% of chance they will end up in a tank with Requisol, Instant Ocean, Marin Pro, or Red Sea Coral Pro, that kind of thing. So for example, that one thing I got from many of my customers who are using the same salt, like the Requisol, which is pretty common and popular, and the coral adapts really well. There basically is no transitional stage. You just go home and just poop everything happy and out.
That's what I
So
love.
so that is of course, that there's no shipping stress. That's a very important thing. That's why I normally don't ship.
I'd stop shipping.
Yeah. So that
was
that's my way of thinking, is that I'm using the commonly available salt, so that my coral go to the new home, they will adapt much easier. So just the way I'm thinking. And also, I'm lazy. Okay, I want to just scoop and dump and dissolve, and that's kind of thing. There's so many. I'm the one-man show, and then taking care of all these thousands of corals. So I just try to find something that's easy. So just scoop and dump and dissolve and pour in, that kind of thing.
Todd from Champion says most salts are regional. People use what they can get easily. That makes sense.
Yeah, the cost of shipping our salt is just mind-blowing. So that's a big issue.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother show. Talk about shipping.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
The shipping industry. I always love to talk about that stuff. What have Don? Is there what else have we? I know we've touched on a lot of stuff here, but you had a question, I know, for Meckley about manganese and Goniopora.
Oh yeah, that about. Oh, actually, we covered some of that already.
Did we?
Actually, I have that question before I find the paper. So then I find out what exactly manganese actually is doing to the coral, and also the more importantly, what it does to the bacteria that the coral feeding on. That the manganese actually plays more important role in the bacterial. So basically, bacteria consume manganese is much more significant than coral does it. But then coral will take in manganese by feeding on bacteria. Probably that is why, the way I'm thinking, just hypothetically thinking, is that why we see so much such a big response from Goniopora, because it's a large polyp coral, and then you feed a lot. So when they feed a lot, and then that means that the bacteria in the water have more impact on Goniopora than Aquapora, because the Goniopora feeds a lot more. So that means that Goniopora is able to take in a relatively larger amount of manganese biologically. So right now, the question is that if you're just dumping element into the water, so how much do they actually get absorbed by the coral, can take in by the coral? But so a lot of times that from those research papers is more like that the bacteria take in the trace element, and then the coral take in the bacteria, and then that's how they incorporate their the trace element into their biological system. So yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I did a little study with Gene's ICP that's probably 3 years ago, we wanted to see what was found in Skimmate. Okay. And what we found in Skimmate, everybody, I asked a bunch of people what they thought we were going to find in Skimmate. And this is after we were dosing, minor and traces for, probably 2 years. People are like, are you going to find, you're going to find all the major elements, calcium is going to be a huge thing you're going to find in it. And I didn't think we were going to find any calcium in it. And actually I was correct. What we found in the Skimmate, after Gene washed it through acid and got rid of all the particulates and everything, the elemental composition of the Skimmate was every single minor and trace element that was found in the water that we were adding to the system. We found zero macro elements whatsoever in the Skimmate. And Gene and I sat there and stared at each other and were like, well, why would that be? And I had a theory a long time ago about why that might be about and what happens to your system and what we're missing from the system by not having the minor and trace elements at least present in the water column. We're missing bacteria. So what happens? What's a protein skimmer do? A protein skimmer skims, the dead, organics out of the water.
Yeah.
So all the bacteria that is dying, that has utilized all of these minor and trace elements, are being skimmed right out of your system. So that's why we found all these minor and trace elements. That's a theory. I don't know exactly if that's true, but it's the only logical thing that I can think of. It's the only logical thing that Gene can come up with. And the only way we can figure that out is actually get a full microbiome test of every species of bacteria and what elements they utilize to thrive. And if you look up what types of bacteria utilize different minor and trace elements, it's endless. So the theory is very plausible that the reason why the Skimmate had minor and traces only was because it was just dead bacteria bodies being
that perfectly makes sense.
So what I'm getting at,
get disagreement by Mr. Wood.
Yeah,
I'll let you go in a second. And I'm sure there's other things that are there too. But what I noticed with dosing minor and trace elements in the system is I always had problems with wild Gonioporas. Always, Gonioporas were just a hit and miss. Certain species of Goniopora did very well. All the short polyp Gonioporas never polyped out, never were happy. And it was like a waste of life. I hated even importing them. And then some of the fast growing and crusting Gonioporas, like the lobatas, we couldn't keep them alive if we didn't feed them heavily. But as soon as the minor and traces started going into the system, I wasn't doing anything different. And we still to this day have a lot better success growing and keeping Gonioporas in our system since minor and traces are being added. So with the manganese aspect of it, I can, like I said earlier, I can tell when my systems are deficient on specific elements. And manganese is one of those big ones. And the fact that it is very bioactive makes sense to me that there's some sort of bacteria population in there that's utilizing the manganese, which is also feeding Gonioporas, because the majority of corals feed mainly, if they're grabbing anything from the water column, they're feeding on bacteria before they're grabbing plankton and other things out of the water column. So go for it, Chris.
Anything that pulls dissolved organic material out of a system is going to passively remove multivalent trace metals.
Okay.
Keith, you had on one of your questions had said something about the catalytic carbon not removing minor and trace elements.
Oh, that was Dong's question. Yeah.
Okay. So this has been going on at least since I came into the industry in 2000. This whole thing about our activated carbon doesn't pull minor and trace elements out. Well, your activated carbon is passively pulling out poly or multivalent trace metals just by virtue of the fact that a percentage of them are going to become bound with dissolved organic material. That's the point of using organic carbon. That's the point of using a protein skimmer. In my mind, a skimmer is there to specifically remove latent dissolved organic material to reduce the amount of that material in the system, to let your ORP run a little bit higher. And there are a number of other practical, results from doing that. But that's primarily, in my mind, what it's there for. It's not there to pull bacteria out. Now, it will do that the same way that organic carb or activated carbon is going to passively pull those multivalent trace metals out specifically. So while it won't directly do that, it will passively do it. Organic adsorption resins will do the same thing. If they're pulling dissolved organic material out of the system, they are passively pulling out those same trace metals that I'm referring to. So not stuff like rubidium, but which is monovalent, but things along the lines of iron and cobalt and manganese, nickel and zinc, and copper. So those are the critical multivalent trace elements that I'm talking, metals that I'm talking about. I'll be specific, metals. So we're not talking non-metals. We're not talking metalloids, vanadium, selenium, molybdenum, but we're talking the other ones. So a skimmer is gonna yank that stuff out of the system just by virtue of the fact that it's removing dissolved organic material from the system. Whether or not that material was pulled as a means of microbial incorporation would be a different matter, and you'd have to figure out how you're going to figure that out. But absolutely, if you're removing dissolved organics from the system, you're gonna remove some of those trace metals, some of those critical trace metals. That's just the passive aspect of what's going on. There's no way around that. So all organic carbon is going to do that. All protein skimmers are going to do that. Anything that can remove dissolved organic material from the system, if it's directly removing it, if it's an organism that's doing it, bacteria or some larger organism, it's going to remove some of those metals.
I was actually referring to the dead bacteria bodies that still had it in it was what was being removed, but I completely understand what you're saying there as well. Does that make more sense then? If bacteria is dead and it still contains the element, it's part of the organic material, correct?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Yes, that's a good way to look at it. And Andrew Sandler is saying GFO as well. And that's absolutely right. GFO has a pecking order. GFO is not what was not meant to be used for phosphate removal. It was meant for arsenic removal from polluted groundwater. So there's a pecking order of what it will pull. It will pull a lot of anions out of the system. So that's
including your alkalinity.
Absolutely. You know, alkalinity being absolutely. Yeah. Right.
Yep. Perfect. So actually that I'm thinking about something that, so that's a banana. So in order for me to take in potassium,
oh, he's breaking out the props.
Oh yeah. So
is that banana in your pocket?
The banana is good for my potassium intake, right? So I think that it could be a lot more effective for me to take in potassium by eating this banana instead of sitting in a bucket of potassium chloride salt. Right?
For you, that's true.
Yes.
Yes.
So for coral, So for coral, that many of the trace element actually is easily incorporated into bacterial, and then the coral eat the bacterial, and that can be their major input. Right. Instead of going through, of course there's a transporter, because the paper also talk about the getting in how trace metal getting into the coral, is that there's of course there's a diffusion and then the basically the transporter on the skin of the coral, but a lot of the majority of them actually by ingestion of bacterial. And the bacteria incorporate the trace metal, and then the coral ingest the bacterial, and then they incorporate into the coral. That's one of the major pathways for how the trace metal get into the coral.
Right. Yeah. So it's absolutely possible to be counterproductive with an excess amount of removal of the bacteria from the system.
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah.
In this instance, if we're talking about you're raising corals specifically, that's what you're trying to do, then yeah, there's a benefit to not overdoing it.
Yeah.
Meckley, do you guys run particulate filtration, like submicron particulate filtration on the systems?
We do. We run 100 micron socks. But if we don't get to change them on an everyday basis, they just overflow. And a lot of times lately, it's been every other day doing it. So there's a lot of settlement in the bottom of the sump. and that's a problem, and it needs to be addressed. That's definitely something that bothers me. I would like to have better means of, trust me, here's the thing. The way we set the farm up was what I knew what I was doing 12 years ago. What I knew then and what I know now, I would not be setting things up that way. I'd be setting up something that would be a lot better at removing the particulates that are in the water column. I don't think it's good to remove all of it, but the amount that we are removing and the amount that gets passed, I think we should be cutting the amount that gets passed by at least 50% or more. And
based on what?
Based on the amount of detritus and stuff I see accumulating at the bottom of the system where the dead areas are.
But what about the corals?
What about them?
How do they look when you don't change them out on a more frequent basis? Like if you guys let it go for a week or something like that, do you notice a difference in polyp extension? Like that's the most obvious thing that's going to be minute to minute almost.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't notice a difference. But again, I'd have to go back and really think about that question, because years ago when we had more staff and we were doing more frequent changes, I don't think we did have as much polyp extension on certain species as what we do today without doing as many sock changes. I think that could be definitely something. Yeah, I see where you're going with that. The more particulates in the water, the more polyp extension, the more food readily available for the corals, and the faster.
I'm just wondering. Yeah, I'm wondering like what the actual observable difference is in the systems if you, from one condition to the next condition. One condition being everything's really running through those filter socks. They've been freshly changed out to it's right before you're going to change them out. Do you notice between point A and point B that there's a tremendous amount of obvious difference?
Yeah, I don't think it's super obvious. I do say now though that and again, what is the reasoning behind it? Is it because of all the things we've been doing to improve the water quality and
sure,
or is it because we're not cleaning the socks as frequently?
Yeah, no, this is not an experiment. Yeah.
No, I mean, I can't really give you a solid answer on that. I wish I could. I know people that don't run filter socks in their personal aquarium and they just let everything settle in the sump and they suck it out once a week. And
that's what I do.
There's no different I mean, that's what I would love to do, but my addiction to corals, I got corals in my sumps and I can't freaking suck it out all the time. So
right.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem, man.
We don't have that.
It's real.
All right. I just a few things here from some comments that I just wanted you guys to address quickly. I'm not sure what Andrew was saying here, but Chris Meckley, he's asking you if you want to chat about our friend Samantha Zoentheli.
Zoentheli, yeah. Samantha Zoentheli is been a huge boost for us. I know Andrew's now using the Zoentheli, and he actually does our concoction of food the way we do it here at ACI. And I hope that it's still true that you haven't lost an acro in the big tank since you've been doing that since you started using it. That would be a great news to hear from you. Yeah, I'd love to have a chat with you sometime here soon. I mean, tomorrow's a good day, buddy. You can give me a call anytime.
Joe Muscat, what's happening there, Joe? Tusi. It's asking you, Chris Meckley, what are you using for as a surface for bacteria population in your farm?
There's really nothing to use. I mean, you got live rock, you got the walls, you got the PVC, you got the egg crate, you got the pipes. I mean, honestly, I think that the amount of substrate you have in your system is overrated. I think just a small amount is all you need because you have all the surface area of every other aspect of your system. I mean, anything that is solid that is in your tank is going to grow bacteria. I literally have in 4,500 gallons, our biggest system, there might be 500 pounds of rock in there. And then we've got, all the pipes, all the walls, and they're all fiberglass tanks. Doesn't matter for fiberglass, they're glass or they're acrylic, they're still going to hold bacteria and they're going to grow bacteria. The egg crate we use to put the coral frags on, that's porous. There's plenty of surface area there. I think less is more when it comes down to that. I used to believe exactly the opposite, where you put, 1 pound of rock per gallon. Well, hell, how would I do that? I'd have a whole damn 1,000-gallon tank stuffed full of live rock. kind of counterproductive. Plus, then you got other
well, and you're running scrubbers too. I mean, your scrubbers are doing such a massive job of nutrient uptake for you that the reliance upon bacteria for that specific thing is dramatically reduced, especially because these scrubbers are mature and you're giving them what they need on a constant basis.
Yep.
So
that system has the surface area scrubber on it too.
What's that?
That system, the biggest system, has the smallest scrubber on it, and I actually have to cycle the light. It's 4,500 gallons. There's a clear water scrubber 300, which is meant for like up to 500 gallons of water. I think they're actually probably good for more like 12 to 1,500 gallons. And in my case, they're actually fine for a 4,500 gallon system. I cycle it on for 12 hours at nighttime, and it's off during the day. And my phosphates are I dose phosphates and I dose nitrates. And I only keep it running because you never know when you're going to get that spike and you need to run it 24/7. And I just start dosing it. You know, I dose calcium nitrate and potassium phosphate. Well, whatever your phosphate additive is, the potassium phosphate.
Yeah.
Yep. So, I do have a question regarding the trace element. Okay, so there's a frequently asked question about trace element is that can you combine them together just like this isolate MT? So before I ask this question, I do appreciate one thing about this isolate MT is that every ingredient is printed on the label, including what salt they are. They use instead of mystery box.
Not snake oil. It's not snake oil.
Oh man,
that's
legit.
Very important. This is a good example that what people should do when they're selling their thing is to have the actual.
And Dong is unbiased here. Let's just remind everybody that Dong is not. He's not a shill for Captivate. Yeah. He's not a shill for Captivate.
No, because that's what I like to see about this. So if it's not printed clearly on the label what exactly is down to what salt it is, I won't use it seriously. Yeah. Because I think that's very important thing to us. In my opinion, as a scientist, I got to know what I'm adding to my tank.
What are they trying to hide if they don't put don't put it on the label? What are they trying to hide if they don't give you the concentrations of what's in that bottle? That's what irritates me. And you see 1999.
This is the thing. I have that question come up a lot when someone says that they want to switch over from one thing to one of our things. And they're asking me the question specifically, how much of yours do I use? And I'm saying, well, okay, the concentration of what you're wanting to move away from is not published anywhere. If you happen to have that information and it's reliable, email it to me and I'll do the quick conversion. No problem. That's easy to do. It's when that information is nowhere. And it ought to be on the label. It really should. I mean, this goes back to, I use Seachem as a great example. When I first started as a marine aquarium hobbyist, they were really good about printing all that stuff on their labels. Now, I haven't looked at a Seachem label in 25 years, but if they're still doing the same thing, then good. I mean, that reflects where that company came from. It was founded by a scientist, and that was important. Why wouldn't you put those things on the label? If something's proprietary, and I have some proprietary stuff, I won't list that, but I'll be, transparent about everything else, so concentrations and where the manganese is coming from, where the cobalt's coming from, all that kind of stuff. That's all there. Because we're not just dealing with the aquarium industry. We're dealing with research. Those people want to know things, what is this? Yeah, not a problem. That's what it's for.
That's always a problem for me not knowing what was in the bottle. Oh, this is an iron supplement. Okay, what's the concentration? I don't know. That irritated me.
As a chemist, I can understand all these things, all these elements or metals, and can coexist in the one bottle. So I don't see there's any reason all these elements cannot be mixed together. But now you know that on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, the backyard liquor method. That's why I'm trying to say it. You know what I'm talking about. So
the experts.
So nothing can be mixed together. As a chemist, as a scientist, I have a big problem with that. So another thing is that when people are marketing or making chemistry related additive. They better know that chemistry or at least have a scientific background. That is very important.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a snake oil salesman. Seriously, that's what
Thank
it
you.
is.
I'm glad you said it because I've been saying it for a long time.
I've been trying not to say it. I've been trying so hard not to say it because I get that question all the time. Why can you combine all these things and they can't? And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, A, I'm not the first person who's done this, but B, I have a fundamental understanding of how these things work, and more than a fundamental understanding of it, I can assure you. But it just, if you know what you're doing, it's not a problem.
Exactly.
That's it. That's it. You know, no, nothing more.
It's not a marketing scheme or anything like that. It is what it is. It's straight to the point. It's the real deal. You're not going to get water in a bottle with, a 0.5 billionths of a gram of an element and say that, oh, there's this and that's in there. It's real, raw elements.
Yeah.
In a bottle.
I make it as strong as I think I can make it. I mean, I could definitely go higher in a lot of stuff. But for aquaculture application, like for Chris, I do a 5,000 part per million manganese supplement because for him to use the 1,000 part per million supplement, it clearly takes a lot more for him to get from point A to point B. So I do a 5,000 for him. That'll probably show up on in the actual aquaculture section of what we do shortly here. But the bottom line is you don't need to make things uber dilute, especially when you're using a drop. And you can do that with a 60 ml bottle. It's so easy to just do a drop. It's not entirely precise. It's going to be about 0.05 mils, about 0.05 mils. That's close enough, for what we're doing here, what we're talking about doing here.
Yeah,
that's close enough. And so if that 0.05 mils will treat 2,500 gallons just as a round number. And like Chris is saying, the iron, if you're in a sterile system and you're trying to raise it to seawater iron, that's about what it takes. Don't put a mill into your system. Not that that's going to be a problem. Seriously. I mean, when I wrote the book, the marine chem book that I wrote in the early 2000s, the guy who edited it was a really nice guy and he had a lot of experience, but he put some things in that book that really frustrated me. And I didn't see it until after they had gone to press. And one of those was the danger of minor and trace element overdosing. And absolutely, those things can be problematic, but it's so blown out of proportion and it's circumstantial to the element. I can tell you that we maintain iodine in our systems here at easily 10 times what they are in natural seawater, and I don't lose anything. And so, because I dose a lot of Lugols, another dirty word. Yes, I use raw iodine.
Me too.
And I have,
type I want.
I have used it. Yeah. I've used it going back to, again, the early 2000s. And I know that it's not problematic. I've seen it dosed in systems at 35 times what it's recommended over a 6-month period. And nothing was lost. We had shrimp spawning nightly. I mean, it was, and once we stopped dosing it like that, everything went back to normal as far as that goes. But all I'm saying is don't take those things out of proportion. I got off of what I was going to say. What the hell was I thinking? I don't remember. I'm getting
overdosing.
Well, you mentioned dirty words, and I had to bring this comment up. Trippy Reef Geek from Reefers Network. You got to check out those dudes on Reefers Network, man. Talk about dirty words, man. Talk about dirty words.
They're fun guys. Those guys are fun.
They're fun guys.
I did a 6-hour stream with them.
I know you did.
You
broke the record
after yours.
Yeah, it was
right
after mine. Yeah.
Yeah, but then like 3 days later, I did 12 hours with Salem. So it's like.
Yeah, right. You shattered that record. Well, we're not going for that record. I'll tell you that right now.
We already blew away your 1 hour. So.
I know the 1 hour is like, forget about that idea.
That's right. Everybody's loving it.
Stupid idea.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, listen, guys, this was a blast. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I
want to say one more thing. All right, I got to make a point for everybody out there, and this again comes back to something that I keep on hearing. The whole thing of you don't need to do water changes when you're using our system, our in air quotes. All right. I'm going to use the dirty word bullshit.
Yep.
If you are using any kind of dosing system where you are putting in major ions that are conservative in nature, I'm going to just use the three: chloride, sodium, and sulfur. You better be doing water changes, because if you don't, those ionic ratios get so far out of balance, it throws everything off later on. And yeah, I know there are examples of YouTube featured aquariums where somebody says, I've been dosing 2-part for the last 4 years and I've never done a water change, and look how my corals are growing rampantly. That's great. That's like the one exception. And I think a lot of people are not going to find that it goes as smoothly for them. So if you're not going to do water changes, eventually that's going to be a problem. If you're dosing primarily Kalkwasser and using a calcium reactor for getting your calcium and your alkalinity, and maybe you're getting some magnesium through mag chloride or mag sulfate or something like that, you don't have to do water changes nearly as frequently, but because you're not putting in these elements that are accumulating. But if you're using 2-part, you should be doing water changes on a constant basis. Very pretty.
Sodium ions get out of whack. Well, I'll give you an example. I went and I did the experimentation. I didn't do water changes for like 3 years. I saw great results from not doing it because I was dialing in the minor traces. I was keeping everything stabilized. With the extra potassium that I was dosing, I figured out how to get that reduced with Chris's help, and I stopped doing water changes. And then I just said, you know what? I haven't done water changes. I'm gonna start doing water changes again. I see if anything is different. And I started doing on the big system, 500 gallons a week. And I noticed such an improvement in everything. And I'm like, wow, 3 years, I thought everything looked spectacular. And not doing any water changes, little ones here and little ones there, nothing of any significance. And then all of a sudden doing 500 gallons a week for 3 months, it's like, oh, okay. You know what? You forgot what it was like when you did those water changes. So I just went back to doing the water changes. Even though I didn't have any ill effects from not doing the water changes, I did see positive effects. And corals living much.
It's a marketing ploy. It's absolutely a marketing ploy to sit there and say you don't need to do water changes. That's making an assumption that runs over the entirety of everybody using your so-called system. If you're going to just be dosing minor and trace elements, the amount of sodium and chloride and sulfur that's going into the system is probably going to be incredibly small, and it's not going to make any difference. But that's not what we're talking about here. You do need to do water changes if you're constantly putting chloride and sodium and sulfur into your system. And that's the basis of 2-part and 3-part supplementation. So that blanket statement, I absolutely take issue with, and it's important to be mindful that there's nothing magical about that. That's aquarium husbandry, and you're not doing it to reduce nutrients, not at this point in time. Now you're doing it to maintain ionic balance. The people who have got issues with nitrate and phosphate going through the roof now relative to 20 years ago, they're in the minority, I would imagine. I mean, now people are saying, I have a hard time keeping my nitrate above 5, and and so on and so forth. It wasn't like that. Now you're doing those water changes to make sure that your ionic balance is hanging within a good range.
And that's what I've told people too. I'm not doing water changes. I don't recommend that people that are supposedly doing the same thing that we're doing, they should still be doing water changes. But there was a lot of people that were doing the Kalk method, and they were also dosing a 2-part at the same time. And that's where I come into having a problem. When you're using a calcium reactor and you're using Kalkwasser, you're not going to, like Chris was saying, you're not going to see, as much of a change in your major ions as what you're going to if you're adding a lot of extra sodium and a lot of extra chloride ions. So it worked really well for us. But if I was doing 2-part on top of Kalkwasser, I think I would have been, probably all kinds of out of whack. and had major problems. And I've had people say that they've had problems not doing water changes. I say, well, why did you stop?
Yeah.
I never told you not to do water changes. I say we don't do water changes. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do water changes. And I think a lot of people have taken words that I've said out of context and said, you said you don't do water changes. Yeah, me.
Right. Yeah, we maintain a half dozen systems here. And by the way, we don't do the same thing on every single one of them. So if that's true, then they're all individual systems. They're all independent. And that means that we got to know what we're doing, with those things. This is the thing. Every system is unique to itself. Every independent system, it should be addressed that way. It should be dosed according to the actual requirements. And husbandry should reflect those things. To make a sweeping generalization about one thing or another and say, oh, this applies to all systems. That's not science. That's not good science at all. In fact, you're going to get called on that by people who will say that's not been my experience and this doesn't make any sense. So again,
I'm sorry. I just saw this comment that Sandler puts in there. Bring back bio balls. You know what? I agree 100% because we had so many problems years ago with our nutrient problem. I want bio balls to be put back in a trickle system so I get some nitrate production.
That's an interesting idea.
I've thought about getting bio beds or bio ball beds put back in and having trickle filters put back on so I don't have to dose nitrates anymore and let them be created naturally into the system.
So now somebody with a 3D printer is going to be going overtime printing bio balls.
I got 55-gallon drums of those things sitting out in the back.
There you go.
Well, with that, guys, I think we're gonna put a wrap on this show. This was a hell of a lot of fun for me, and I had a blast with Dong being my co-pilot on this, and of course having you two guys on was the perfect first episode for the revised version of this live stream and podcast. So I want to thank everybody for being a part of this thing, and also everybody that tuned in. We had a big audience tonight, so thank you all around. And
yes.
So I also want to thank our sponsors one more time before we sign off. Polo Reef. Make sure to check out Polo Reef's new YouTube video. The team loaded up 9 prize Japanese koi and flew to Las Vegas for the All-American Koi Show. The competition was fierce. The flight back home was frightening. I got to check this video out, man. Was ended with a life-threatening scare and police on the scene. It's definitely not a video to miss. Make sure to subscribe to their YouTube channel at Polo Reef for video drop notifications. Champion lighting and supply. Flow is very important for keeping corals happy in a reef. Growing corals can block flow from wave makers and create dead spots. That's about to change. The ocean sea wave will oscillate any wave maker or powerhead in your aquarium from 0 to 180 degrees at an adjustable speed. I was watching Chris Meckley's presentation at Restock on that device. It was pretty cool. This creates natural dynamic flow patterns, reduces dead spots, and kicks up detritus. The Ocean Sea Wave is available exclusively through Champion Lighting and Supply. Visit championlighting.com for more information. And finally, ReefnBid. ReefnBid is the first of its kind in the reefing hobby, an online auction marketplace built by reefers for reefers to alleviate traditional auction pain points with features like auto pay. ReefnBid currently hosts over 40 sellers ranging from established vendors such as Aqua SD and Pieces of the Ocean to private hobbyists. It's like going to a virtual frag show and getting great deals in auction format. Check them out at reefnbid.com. Paul Allen, if you're still, I hope you're not still up watching this podcast. Get well soon, dude. But looking forward to having you back on as a moderator. He's the president of the Boston Reefers Society. Please join and support your local reefing clubs. They are so important to this hobby. Finally, I will let you all know that all episodes of Rappin With ReefBum will be available as podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Amazon. The next Rappin With ReefBum live stream will be on Tuesday, May 20th. Yes, 1 month from this date. Our guests will be Dr. Sanjay Yoshi, Mike Paletta, and Andrew Sandler. We're going to be talking about the future of reef keeping. Well, that's going to be a really cool, fun episode. Anyway, so guys, again, thank you so much for being a part of this. I
It was
had
an
a
honor
blast.
to be here. Honor to be here.
Always
Great.
an honor to be here.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're back, buddy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Glad to be back. I sorely missed doing this. I didn't realize it, I guess, until tonight. So thank you guys again, and be safe, everybody out there, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody.